We can't say the future without AI. I mean, there's no way around it. 50% of workers now believe AI is going to improve their experience. When I come into the meeting room, I need a way to incorporate my AI with what's going on in the meeting. It's almost a bring your own AI type of a concept. Most of what we do in our day-to-day is going to change significantly.
Hear the latest AV trends and predictions in this episode of Crestron's Smarter Spaces podcast on your preferred podcast platform.
We are in the midst of our AVNation Reader's Choice Awards. The nomination process is now, so go to the website, avnation.tv, and nominate, and the voting for that starts the first week of January as well.
And spread managed democracy throughout the galaxy.
It is the holidays. That means it's time for the best of AV Week. We take a look back at the most popular, the biggest stories, and the most interesting conversations to happen on AV Week in 2024. All that and more next on AV Week. This is AV Week, episode 697, the best of 2024. This is AV Week, the weekly wrap-up of the biggest news and stories for the AV industry. My name is Tim Albright. This week, though, it's not the biggest news of the week. We are looking back farther than just 1 week. We are at the end of 2024, which has proven to be a rather interesting year in the pro AV space. So today, we're going to look back at the biggest stories, the biggest news, and quite frankly, the most popular podcast of AV Week for 2024. First, we start off with AV Week 664, where the Champions League announced they would not be streaming their football tournament in 4K. Football is soccer, for those of you keeping score. The reasons they stated were a lack of interest in the higher fidelity, but also could have come down to data issues and the fact that not everyone is watching in the most ideal conditions, meaning not everybody's going to have 4K and not everybody is going to have a 4K pipe. After all, kind of what's the point in streaming 4K if you're going to watch it on your phone?
Get real.
We talk with Jenny Hicks, Michael Peevler, and Steve Greenblatt about what our industry can do to make 4K a viable streaming option.
If everyone was watching on a home television screen or in a bar or a venue, absolutely, they would see the benefit. But the reality is that a significant amount of the viewers for sports now is on a mobile device, and often, whilst doing something else and wandering around. And I do think that this plays a massive part in it. So it's not a refusal to pay or a lack of recognition of the benefit. It's simply, I'm not viewing it on that platform, so they're not even being asked, if that makes any sense. There's such a shift in viewership when it comes to sports, particularly for football in Europe. Soccer, sorry. So I've got two minds in this. So I see that there's been frustration with people trying to watch on mobile devices because of the bandwidth increase and so on. They don't get the benefit, but they do get the difficulties that come with it. And then I also see the longer term effect of this, that if any more industries follow suit, what happens is that we don't see mass production of 4K display and connectivity and streaming kit that goes with it. Thus, the price remains high and we don't move forward the way that we're supposed to following tech evolution. So that annoys me, because I think that 4K and above is incredibly necessary for signage content, particularly in food and fashion and so on. And it's huge for us in cinema as well. But I think it's just a change of culture. We've stopped watching sports in home cinemas with surround sound and big screens, and we now watch it whilst on the move.
Steve, same kind of question. You've been around the industry a long time, and you watched the original HDs come out. So, where are we at with this push to multiple Ks?
So the idea kind of reminds me of the fact that you buy based on benefits, not features. So this kind of demonstrates that if the consumer isn't seeing and noticing the difference, like Jenny's saying, and they're not really gaining much more from it, then we've gotten to a point where we may have maxed out for the average person. However, again, we should be evolving. Our industry wants there to be new and greater and bigger and more capable, because that's what we do, and that drives sales and opportunities. But we have to think again about the people consuming, and if they're not noticing the difference, then that kind of drives the market.
Michael, as somebody who is a longtime fan of Crystal Palace and watching from, he is.
That's all right. Hottest team in the EPL right now.
And obviously, so Michael is here in the States, right? Central time zone with me. So watching, Premier League is not easy. It's very early on a Sunday morning or a Saturday morning typically. But as somebody who does, obviously, you watch a lot of sports, and looking at this change, I guess the question here is when do we pull back, I guess, as an industry from pushing this multiple, 8K and beyond? Or is it, this is a segment of consumers that, like Jenny says, they're watching on smaller screens, but there are other cases where digital signage and healthcare, right, where you're looking at medical imaging, the 8K and beyond still makes sense.
Yeah, I think Jenny nailed it, actually. She's dead on. There's so many times I'm watching here, right? It's because, I like to get to the pub and watch the matches there. But there are times that, my wife has other plans for me, the kids have other stuff going on, and I've got to be wherever, and I'm probably not going to miss the game best I can. So, I'm going to be watching, and look, I'm buying an app, through a network here in the US, and then it's streaming over wireless. And I mean, the reality is I can't guarantee the quality of what I would get no matter what. And then you've got to realize that the audience for this isn't, for this particular event or these two events, this isn't just, Western Europe and North America where we have the infrastructure. This is all over the world in small villages and in places where, and you see it. I mean, you see it being a Premier League fan, how many people are wearing, kit from a team in little bitty villages in the middle of nowhere. And, they're lucky to hear it on the radio, much less stream it on a TV. So I can see why the benefit, the benefit of the feature wouldn't make enough of a difference. You just want to watch the match, right? So I think she's right. To your question, Tim, I don't know that we're going to back off. I mean, the Olympics are still going to be in 4K, and all these other big events coming up. The NFL is still going to be doing everything in 4K. They're using and doing more with it, right? We see the networks really utilizing the clarity and everything that they have there, and we're not paying for it most of the time, unless you're paying for a YouTube TV or something else. But you're not just doing that for sports, right? You're doing that for everything you watch, and you're watching it on a larger format display most of the time. And for unique applications like healthcare and digital signage and stuff like that, which now, again, we're back to very big established markets that have infrastructure, right? It makes sense because there's a benefit to it that makes a difference. But for this in particular, when I read it, it didn't surprise me at all, because it's talking about, just watching football, which I love to do. But it wouldn't make sense there's no guarantee that I'm watching on 4K no matter where I'm watching it.
Speaking of restructuring technology, there were a number of changes made to offices and campuses to meet the needs of the pandemic. The good news is that, knock on wood, we are well past that. And if this sentence comes back to bite us, I'm going to blame our producer, Mitchell. The current problem is that now that we've come back to the office space, what happens to that technology? We sat down with George Chaco, Gina Sansevero, and Justin Watts in AVWeek 658 to talk about that process.
Tim, I will be honest with you, and these are my opinions only. I just want to say that to be clear. I read that and I was like, Kinley has a vested interest in these numbers. Kinley has a vested interest in making sure that equipment is turned more quickly than maybe it could or should be. So that was my initial thought. I have heard people say we probably need to upgrade in the next year or two. I have not heard a lot of end users or in-house integrators say that we're pulling all of our COVID era equipment out. Uh, yes, of course there are some. I'm just not hearing it at that number. And so when I thought about it and I saw who put this out and I saw the coverage and I was like, okay, there's got to be something here that just makes it a little bit fishy.
All right, Jacko, same kind of question is and no offense taken. I worked for many years inside higher education. Nothing as big as Pace, but at least 10 years ago, we didn't move very quickly.
Yeah.
So how do you do this?
Gina, I share your opinion. I think this is Kinley's perspective per se. No one's ripping out everything that they have in a box or in a classroom, in a conference room. It's not realistic, right? And we at Pace, we have a 4 to 5 year equipment cycle replacement in place, which works really well for us. But that doesn't mean I'm going to rip out a laser projector with less than 10% of usage just because it's come up on 4-year life cycle, right? That's crazy to think that I'm going to spend, $8, $9, $10,000 on a projector just because it's post-pandemic, right? So during the pandemic, yes, we scrambled, we put our heads together, we got, these Zoom carts, so to speak, and we put them in every classroom. I think we purchased about 150 or so of these Zoom carts and we put them in classrooms. Yes, now they're kind of clunky and in the way and people running into them. So we're trying to get these carts out of the room, but the brains, the UC, the functionality remains. We put that into the podium. We put cameras in the room. We use microphones to capture the rooms. That tech is still being used. It is, my personal opinion, I think it's inaccurate that we're pulling all this stuff out. We are adapting. If things go into life, if there's end of support, yes, we'll swap them out. But stuff that works, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
All right, Watch, you're just sitting there shaking your head as these two are talking, so I'll just let you go.
Gina, you hit the nail on the head when you said when you read it. I looked at it and I was like, who on earth are these folks talking to? Because one, I want their refresh cycle. If they can do that kind of stuff that quickly, I want that in my life. Because from a corporate perspective, everywhere I've worked has had a amortization cycle that's between 5 and 6 years, right? Don't even start. Two, I want to touch something that George said, and I think this is one of the key reasons why you don't see a lot of these things getting ripped out. During the pandemic, to use a term that when I worked at Google, that was kind of defined, doing googly things, we got very scrappy, right? We had to find ways to do stuff with things that we didn't even know existed, and we couldn't find half the parts to make it work, right? One of the things I learned during the pandemic from a design perspective is that my user experience can get away with a lot less than I thought it needed, right? And from a developer perspective, it changed the way I looked at designing conference rooms and designing systems, because we had a lot of pieces in place that did a fantastic job and they delivered what we were looking for. But as we skimmed things down to provide what was available for my new builds during the pandemic and long lead times, I realized we were still meeting the user experience a lot more efficiently. So if anything out of COVID, we learned how to do our jobs a lot better. I'll be really honest. We had to dig deep. We had to figure out how to do things on the fly. And in the end, we learned to really focus on the user experience versus trying to focus on whose name's on the box in the room. So again, I'll echo everyone else. These are my opinions because I don't want to, take it in any other direction, but I don't see that happening. I mean, how can you justify that kind of lift? How can you also support that kind of lift? Because at the scope and scale of some of the places they were talking about, that's like a multi-year tech debt project that, you just mentioned talking about budgets getting smaller. We're still trying to find folks to do the work now.
Yeah.
I don't see us tossing all this stuff on top of the tire fire right now, especially as we're just getting our feet back under us from what COVID was.
Yeah.
Also, from a design perspective, when you design a classroom, when you design an event space, when you design a conference room, scalability should and is number one priority. You can't just say in 4 years, there is a possibility in 4 years that it will go out the window, but this crystal ball that we look into, Justin and I specifically, you kind of expect it to be there in 4 years and 5 years, and you build to that. Right? You know what I mean? Like, you don't just, oh, it's 4 years, we're done with that.
Well, and then to plug it into the Yamaha story, I mean, what happens when this happens?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right? Am I supposed to go and rip out everything now that Yamaha's not? No. You develop a ramp down plan to ensure you're covering all your bases. And also, I'd argue that this is a fantastic time that if the stuff you're doing right now isn't hitting the mark when it comes to what you had to buy from Amazon during COVID to make things work, don't laugh. We all did
absolutely.
it. If we're doing that, why don't you take a second and relook at your standards to ensure you're meeting the requirements in the first place, right? If we're double clicking on these little things that are causing all this heartache because it's not a Furman branded this or a this branded that, then is it really something you need in the environment? Holistically look at it, break it down, ensure you're meeting the mark.
The next topic that showed up plenty of times this year were AV experiences, like Crestron's work on the new and improved draft room for the New York Giants, which we talked to them at length about in an AVNation special, completely shameless plug. But there were other opportunities to utilize AV for unique experiences. One such example was the Lionel Messi experience in Miami, with interactive zones tracing Messi's journey through football. Again, football is soccer and soccer is soccer. In AVWeek 663, we talked with Brock McGinnis, Danny Hayasaka, and Kristen Bidwell about how we can use AV to enrich spaces like this.
I have been experiencing the kinds of things that Moment Factory does probably for 25 years.
Okay.
They do opening ceremonies of Olympics. There are a lot of innovative, artistic people kind of clustered in Montreal. They're in the video gaming industry. They're in the event industry. So this is where Cirque du Soleil came from, and all of the the Moment Factory people have traditionally been part of that kind of creative group. Very unique. The magic part is they find people who have the budgets to be able to fund what they do. I was looking at that fish information. Actually, when Danny first logged on, I was playing fish music because I'd realized that I hadn't listened to the band for a long, long time, and it's really good music. And apparently, you don't have to use cannabis in order to enjoy it. So I was having a great time. We live. We used to want to go to places. I grew up in this traditional kind of Leave It to Beaver family. We had a list of vacation spots that we wanted to go to every summer. And we'd go to, dip our toes in the Pacific Ocean and then dip our toes in the Atlantic Ocean. And then it became, well, you want to go to Disneyland, and then you want to go to Disney World, and you want to go to Paris, and you want to go to Amsterdam. Well, now people don't want to go to places. They want to have experiences. They want to feel something. They want to be part of something, and they want to go, oh, wow. So for creators, and those unique creative people that can put you in the oh wow, whether that's at, I think it's called Area 15 in Las Vegas, and Meow Wolf is there. Whether that is one of the immersive Dolly exhibits that go around, where you walk into a big room and there are paintings. Maybe it's Renoir, maybe I forget who all they do, but brands have certainly started to understand this, that are marketing. They will attract us. They're not just selling Lionel Messi in Miami. They're selling soccer tickets. They're selling the sport. And they're also bringing together a community of a lot of, Central and South Americans that are there in one place. And I have to think that it's going to be a huge destination for people who are football fanatics to go and visit. That's awesome. And that's that, and everybody will have their photo on Instagram of them, being part of that experience. It's been a really interesting evolution of society, for sure.
Kristen, as you're talking to clients and whether they say they want an exceptional experience or not, how do you lead them down that path and create more of these, as Brock says, experiential destinations?
Each client is different. I think having that for us, we do a lot of commercial spaces, some of the experiential museum type of spaces. And it really starts with trying to understand what their message is. What are they trying to get across? So Brock just mentioned, it's not just messy, it's the sport. It's the selling tickets. It's where's the real value add? I mean, I'm a huge Messi fan. I would personally love to go see that. Maybe next InfoComm. I can take a trip down, but it's, he's absolutely right. And it's selling that whole brand of soccer, right? And it's similar to what we saw when I was in high school. The women's soccer team was amazing. And so, I mean, I've always played soccer since I was, first grade. But that really inspired me. I was like, oh, wow, like you can actually do this as like a career. And like I started getting, calls for colleges. And it was just like all of a sudden it became a thing for girls my age where it wasn't before. And like the whole movement really sold us on the sport. And I think that if the women's soccer team at that time wasn't doing so well, maybe I don't know if I would have been as motivated to play in college, And so it was, he's absolutely right. So I think when we're talking to clients, it's kind of like, okay, what do you want to have? You want to have a video wall in your lobby. You want to have this amazing museum experience, but what's that underlying content doing for you? What is that experience doing for people that walk through your space? And I think really understanding that leads to those spaces, and then we can kind of show examples of what's possible, and then people's minds are somewhat blown because a lot of people don't know about those spaces either. So like showing them, hey, this is what's going on. And luckily, like places like the Sphere, now everyone knows about it. So that's a great example of an immersive experience. But on a much smaller scale, it's like, okay, you want to have this, you want to invest in it. Where's your value add? And then we go from there. But we are definitely finding that most clients want some kind of experience in their space. They don't just want the space. So it's, I think it's an incredibly important feature of our clients' locations.
Just so it's been said, if you are going to InfoComm in Las Vegas, the remaining members of the Grateful Dead will be playing at the Sphere that week. So if that's your jam,
cool.
There you go. Danny, I'll ask you, and this one on you. How do you get out of your clients what they want, right? Because sometimes they're like, "Oh, I need this," right? And it's like, okay, check the box and put the PO through. How do you get like that out of them when you're trying to say, when they're trying to explain what it is ultimately that they're trying to accomplish?
Yeah, so that's interesting that this whole immersive experience thing happened because we actually converted. So we decided, our CEO decided, work where you work best. So the majority of the employees work remotely. We were able to open up our hiring outside of Florida, but that left an empty space. So what did we do with the space? So that's when it started with Logitech. We convert. How do we get people to understand that what this technology does? Because you can talk about a video bar, you can show them all the spec sheets, but until you actually experience what it does, you don't really know. And so we have converted our office or our headquarters into a customer experience center. And so we have different rooms and they're all themed differently. So we have the Logitech room, which is kind of like a space theme. It was the first one. So it's kind of a cool little space theme. We have the HP Poly room, which is more of a corporate type looking space. We have the Neat experience space, which is crazy purple, the neat purple colors all over, and it has the neat board that you can wheel around to show people that you can move this thing wherever. We have the Jabra space with a kind of signature Teams room, and their Panic has 50 VBS. And we have also little personal workstations all over. And then we have the Owl Labs room, and then now we're building out the Yealink experience room. But what happens is we bring customers in, and this is what I was saying before, until you show people what's possible and available, they don't know. They really don't know. And so when they come into this room, we ask them, when you walk into the meeting space that you want us to work on, what is it that you want to do in that space? Are you training? Are you collaborating? Are people just sitting there listening? What is happening in that space? And it's actually even better to do like a virtual demo, to do an in-person demo, but it's better when we actually go on site and see their space, because they leave out a lot of things. So sometimes when they come into our space, we show them something as simple as a Logitech Scribe. People may have heard of it. They don't know about it, but we ask them, what do you do with your dry erase whiteboards today? Do you use them in meetings? They're like, oh yeah, we use them all the time. How do you share that whiteboard, that dry erase analog whiteboard in a video meeting? Oh, we take a picture, right? And then they send it, right? I said, well, what if you could do this? And then this is the beauty of an experience room. What if you could and you press that little purple button and there's your whiteboard in the meeting, in the Zoom meeting. And now people can actually see it, and you're ghosted. You like disappear because of the technology. So it's it's a better experience being a remote participant. But now they see this technology. And so now their wheels start spinning, because now they start to realize there are things that are possible that they weren't aware of, they weren't even thinking of, because they had never experienced that technology. The same with the framing modes. Like you can take a room with, like in the neat space, you can take 16 people and put them in their own little frame without having to touch anything, without having to do anything. You just show up, and the technology enables you to focus on your business, and the technology just captures it and lets everybody have a great experience, whether you're physically in the room or joining remotely. And that's when we talk about experiences, we have to show them. And the best way to do that is to book a demo and then start asking those questions. What about this? Do you guys ever need to do this? Because sometimes they don't know because they've never seen it or experienced it.
Finally, we talk about digital signage as a service. Service models are not a new thing to the industry, but having signage doled out like this is fairly recent. Samsung partnered with Quest Technology Management back in March to offer digital signage through their VXT platform. In AVWeek 663, we sat down with Bill Fons, Aaron May Moran, and Joel Carroll to talk about the future of service models like this for our industry.
20 years ago, we thought digital signage was going to take off in like a super big way. Everybody was anticipating.
Still waiting for that, by the way.
But now I think we're at the point where there's so many chefs in the kitchen. There are hundreds of platforms. There are so many people doing digital signage, and the lines are
and really quickly, there are so many platforms for the platforms.
Exactly.
Like there are so many. You can go pick out a player. And each player will have 100 to 300 platforms. Go ahead.
And we're all like, even the ecosystem, right? So some of my dear friends, because we're a big digital signage company, and some of my great friends are, they're frenemies. Like we love each other on Monday, and then we're enemies on Tuesday because we're going after the same job. But it's not a disciplined marketplace. Lots of freewheeling going on. And so I look at that like when they just said, I wanted to make sure I grabbed that phrase. That they were trying to make it easier for the SMBs. I wonder if that's the same thing we said when Napster came out as an artist. We're trying to make it easier for people to get their music. I kind of feel like the musician when you make that comment. Like, what does that do to where the cheese was moved for us? I just think that it's hard to keep up on that, and relying on a lot of that digital signage, business. Again, you've got some product out there that is really strong at doing some things, and some product that is really weak at doing those things, but strong in others. And I don't know if we're asking for help with how to use the Samsung product. Great that we have one, but that's my own opinion anyway. I I feel like that's something we do as integrators to stitch together, and we do that well.
Aaron, as a service has been around for a while, especially in the AV industry. We've been talking about it. Where does digital signage as a service fit into that ecosystem
compared to the others on the on this today? As being a end user, my group has always been like very leery of any as a service thing. We're like, we'll take care of it ourselves. But this is one of the ones that actually kind of intrigues me the most, because it is still somewhat of the fringe for AV, because it doesn't fall necessarily under my team directly. It doesn't fall under IT directly. Digital signage on our campus has kind of fallen under each individual department. And then it's kind of, now it's essentially the Wild West. Luckily, we have had a bit of a bringing together of to try to come up with a standard, but it still is difficult to manage each of these things separately, and also the content. Essentially, when it's left up to a department where they don't necessarily have someone who's technical, they don't have someone who's going to be a content creator, they don't have someone who can manage it regularly, it'd be kind of nice to be like, well, it'll be cheaper to outsource some of this than to actually have to hire somebody who then is responsible to deal with it all. If there's, if for, schools or businesses that don't already have a person that can fall under, we've got so many things we're doing as it is. Let's push some of it off on somebody else for once.
Joel, you have the last word on this. Where does digital signage fall in the whole, as a service model or the as a service ecosystem?
I mean, it's the as a service model, especially in AV, is still being built out, right? I haven't seen many integration companies or manufacturers really do a whole lot of a total as a service as this. The word came up, and it's interesting that you sent me this article today, Tim, because I read another article about something called subscription fatigue. And subscription fatigue, Aaron, you kind of alluded to it, and I'm saying this, and my CEO is going to hear me saying this, right? Because we're a company that has a subscription, but it's true. People have subscription fatigue. But with that being said, and couldn't find all the details about this specific offering, although people have subscription fatigue, if a subscription is built in the correct way, there's value and people will use that. And when you look at that, I think this is where there is value. Aaron mentioned a couple of the key points, not getting to the detail if they're doing the content build or whatever, but it's a set and forget. They bring it in, you pay, and they monitor it, they maintain it, they make sure it's always going to be there. I don't know if you can actually get a subscription even on your Caterpillar tractors to ensure that they're monitored remotely and they can get those fixed as well. So when you look at that, I think it's becoming a little bit more mainstream. And again, if the value is there, it's important. I think we're going to see it take off. I do feel that in the world, we are going to see a whole bunch of other services come and go with subscription tied to it. And part of that is because they probably didn't value that process right. A lot of investors are saying everything has to go to subscription. That's probably where some of this is coming from. But again, if it's built correctly and it has the value for the customer, and if the manufacturer is willing to listen, I think it's key. What comes with that, is that the labor and everything. So, I mean, I think it's interesting. I do come from a different perspective because of, where I work, but man, it's impressive. And this VXT stuff, I think brings digital signage to the masses. The content problem, we can play digital signage for people and they're like, where do you get the content? I'm like, yeah, man. So you got to get a guy to do the thing and then she does that and they do. So that does provide an interesting, unique environment there.
I want to add to something you were saying a minute ago, Joel. Like, we're talking about, SaaS and even hardware as a service stuff. I talk to other companies about this a lot too, because we're searching for the best way to sort of build and define the ROI from doing an implementation. Yeah. And I suspect maybe we've been doing it backwards. I don't think there's something positive to come up with to convince somebody to do it, because I think that's easy. I think what we've been missing is defining the negative and where that is. And it can be just as simple as some housekeeping thing with your tax consultant at the end of the year. I look at why is it that it's okay that we were putting fax machines in, that we don't use them anymore, but your copier, nobody ever bought that stuff. You always lease it. You always have an average service model there. Your phone is the same way. But yet somehow when we're talking about our AV technology or digital signage, it kind of does that now. But there's some of the products that we sell just always hit a roadblock, and it's at the end. And I have a feeling it's because somebody decides, well, I didn't done this the same way in the last 10 years, and I don't want to flag something for an audit this year. When I go, suddenly we didn't spend a couple $100,000 on rooms, and now I'm doing a lease, and I just don't want to bring that headache. And I don't know that that's the answer. I'm just saying that there's got to be something there that we've all been chasing the wrong thing to find a way to get it done.
And that's our show. That is the best of 2024 for AV Week. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for continuing to read AVNation and going by AVNation.tv. If you haven't done so, check out our other fantastic podcasts, things like A State of Control, where we talk about control automation, Women in AV, where we talk about women in the AV industry, Ed Tech, that takes a look at the higher ed space, and Jen Weaver has a brand new show for us this year called AV Career Masterminds, where she talks with folks about getting jobs in the industry. They're all fantastic, hosted by fantastic people, none of which are me. But also check out ResiWeek, which is just like AV Week, only it's not hosted by me, and we take a look at the residential side. So check all those out and more. But go by the website, avnation.tv, avnation.tv. You can see all of those. You can also check out our ISC coverage, which we have already started putting things up. So we will check you out in 2025. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for watching. That is all the time we have for AV Week.
The network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV. This
is AVNation.
This is AVNation.
Hello, this is Steve Greenblatt, host of AVNation's A State of Control podcast. Each month, Rich Fregosa and I explore trending topics related to control, programming, and automation in the audiovisual industry. We speak with a variety of AV professionals who share their perspectives, knowledge, and experiences. Please join us for this monthly conversation. Check out A State of Control on avnation.tv or wherever you get your podcasts.